Hello and welcome to the latest video from Oakleigh Watches. On this video we're going to talk about the 5 things you should know before buying a Rolex Datejust. This video actually came about from a comment on one of our previous videos. Simon Goddard, if you're watching this, thank you very much for your comment. You've reminded me that it's not all about sports Rolex. There are plenty of people out there who love a Datejust or a day date or an Oyster Perpetual. So 5 things you should know before buying a Datejust. The first thing is that there is no such thing as just a Rolex Datejust. There are so many different versions of the Rolex Datejust over the years. Different sizes, different formats, bracelets, bezels, dials, so many different things. I'm going to show you just some of those in general terms today. So we're going to kick off with case size. Now, the classic Rolex Datejust is the 36mm. This is a 36mm bimetal Datejust from the 1980s. So when we think about the classic Datejusts from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, they were all this size. In the 2000s, Rolex realized that fashions had changed. People were looking for a larger format watch. This is a Datejust 41, and if we look at the difference in the size between the 41 and the 36 on what are two very similar watches, fluted bezels, Jubilee bracelets, which we'll come on to in a bit, you can see that the 41 is quite a lot bigger. It wears quite a lot bigger than the 36. After case size, the next thing to think about is bracelet and bezel configurations. These massively affect how the watch looks, how it wears, and the cost as well. So this is a 126334. 41mm Datejust. It's on a Jubilee bracelet with a fluted white gold bezel. So the Jubilee bracelet gives it a dressier feel, and the white gold fluted bezel also gives it a dressier feel. They also add to the cost. The Jubilee bracelet costs more than the Oyster. The bezel in white gold naturally costs more than the plain one, which is in stainless steel. I actually had a 41mm Datejust with a smooth bezel on an Oyster that I was going to use for this video, but it sold within the last few days and it's gone. So I'm moving in a bit of a ringer here. This is an Oyster Perpetual 36mm, and it has the smooth steel bezel and it has the Oyster bracelet. So if we were to compare the two, you can see very clearly that with the fluted white gold bezel and the Jubilee, it gives a very different feel to the watch. It makes it more dressy, it makes it more of a special occasion thing perhaps, rather than the Oyster and the smooth bezel that gives it a more workaday kind of a feel. The next thing to look at in the difference is dial color. The dials on a Rolex Datejust come in a variety of colors. Traditionally, in previous generations of the Datejust, champagne was very, very popular, and then there were white ones and black ones and some blue ones. These days, the most popular color is probably blue. Green is also very popular. Black, white, and slate are other popular colors. The color of the dial really makes a difference to how the Datejust feels. So again, by comparison, we're going to have a look here at these two. Hopefully we can catch the light on them sufficiently well that you can see that the Azzurro blue sunburst dial on the watch on the left here gives it a very different feel to the black dial on the right. It makes it lighter, it makes it fresher, whereas the black dial is a fair bit more serious and understated, even with the fluted bezel and the Jubilee bracelet. The next thing we need to look at is case size. The Datejust comes in a number of case sizes over the years. They started out at 26mm for the ladies. The ladies now tends to be 28. There are two mid-size, which is a 31, which is a larger lady size, and a 34 mid-size. Then there's a 36 and a 41. So what we have here, we've got a 31 and a 36. So we can compare the two here. If you look at the difference between the 31 and the 36, that's a fair leap. If we then have another look at the leap between the 36 and the 41, what we can see there is, again, quite a significant increase in size. So very much more suitable to a larger wrist, the 41. So when you're buying a Datejust, it's well worth considering what case size suits you. Moving on to the second important point when buying a Datejust is originality. Not as important with the newer versions, although you should watch out for a difference in reference between the smooth bezels perhaps and the fluted bezels. This Datejust 41 is a 126334. That 334 tells you it should have a fluted white gold bezel. If it had a smooth bezel on it, that would be wrong. It should be a 126300 with a smooth bezel. So check the reference against the characteristics of the watch and just make sure the watch is 100% original in that way. Originality becomes much more important when you look at the older Datejusts, vintage Datejusts. So the things you should consider: is the dial original? Is the bracelet original? Are the hands original? You see quite a lot of Datejusts about where dials have deteriorated over the years and they've become repainted or refinished. This ruins the originality of any vintage watch, including the Datejust, so keep your eyes open for that. This is a particularly important example. This Datejust 36 has got an original Tiffany & Co dial. It's a textured Tiffany & Co dial, as you can see here. The originality of that is essential. It doubles the price of this watch on the market because it's a collector's piece. So particularly with things like that, we should be considering, is the dial original? Has it been repainted? Has it been refinished? The next thing to think about is wear and tear. Fluted gold bezels are quite susceptible to wear. They can become soft if they're worn a lot or if they've been badly polished at any point. The valeting and the polishing of a fluted gold Rolex bezel is an art form, only to be tackled by people who really know what they're doing. Very, very easy to make a mess. So definitely something to consider when you're looking at Datejusts. How crisp and sharp is the bezel? Bracelets. We've seen the difference between the Oyster and the Jubilee bracelet on your Rolex Datejust. The Oyster bracelet tends not to wear too badly over a long period of time, unless it's worn loose or very, very heavily worn. Jubilee bracelets are a bit different, and they can have a tendency to go quite slack. When we're considering the condition of a Rolex Jubilee bracelet, we do what's called the droop test. Now this Datejust 41 is a new watch, and if we hold the watch by the head like that, you can see there is a little play in the bracelet, but it is really very, very little, just enough to make it comfortable. If we have a look at the one from the 1980s, there's a little more wear there, nice and comfortable, still very safe, still very secure. That's a really good example of a 40-year-old Jubilee bracelet. Sometimes you see them and they sag very, very badly, and they hang right down. To be avoided, really. Those bracelets can be rebuilt, but it's expensive, particularly if they've got precious metals in them. And there are sufficient examples out there that are nice that you can avoid a bad one. The fourth point to think about when you're looking at buying a pre-owned Rolex Datejust: box, papers, accessories, that kind of thing. You may have read the article that's on our website that says, do I need box and papers? If you haven't, there's a link to it in the description below. Have a look. Papers on a watch do not guarantee its authenticity. So don't be taken in by the thought that just because it's got papers, it's definitely a real watch. So why would you have box and papers? Box and papers are nice to have if you like them. You're going to be paying more for the watch, but it will be worth more. So think about, do I need box papers, or would I just have a loose watch? Sometimes a watch is so rare that it's virtually impossible to get with box and papers, or equally, the rarer a watch is, the price of the box and papers can go through the roof. Let's take this Tiffany, for instance. This is such a rare watch that, as we've said, it is twice the price of an equivalent watch with a different, more standard dial on it. If this watch had box and papers, it would probably be 50% more again. So anybody who's interested in a Tiffany dialed Rolex would probably be very happy with this one, because for one, they're extremely difficult to get with papers, and for two, the price of those papers could be £5,000, £6,000, £7,000. So that's a definite consideration. With something like the Datejust 41, if you want one with papers, there are plenty out there with papers. But if you're not bothered, save yourself some money and buy one without. The final point about buying a Rolex Datejust is the same point about buying any watch. Buy the seller before you buy the watch. In that way, you're borrowing from their experience, the years that they've put in. Yes, you will pay a little bit more than you might from buying from the guy down the pub, but the peace of mind that that gives you is worth every penny. I hope you enjoyed that video on the 5 points to consider before buying a Rolex Datejust. If you did, please like, please subscribe, please share, and please comment. This video came from a comment that was on one of our previous videos. It really helps us to know what you're thinking, and we'll bring you content that you like in the future. Thank you very much.